Maalab na pagbati Pilipinas! Welcome sa second part ng aming webinar series, Safely Covering the 2022 Elections. Ako si Neil Eco ng Altermidya Network.
At ako naman si Mench Tilendo ng Bulatlat.
Last time, Mench, ibinahagi sa atin ni Kath Cortez at JB Diveza ang ilang safety tips sa pagka-cover ng elections. O actually, pati labas din sa elections na coverage, no? At pati na rin kung ano ang mga mapupulot nating aral mula sa nangyaring Ampatuan Massacre na alam naman natin na at that time nangyari sa kasagsagan ng papalapit na elections.
Yes, tama ka dyan, Neil. At binigyan din tayo ng ilang tips kung paano natin mapapanatiling ligtas ang ating mga sarili sa digital space ng IT expert at IT consultant ng PH Cert na si Lito Averia. Ngayon naman itutuloy natin ang tsikahan tungkol sa paparating na elections dahil alam naman natin tuwing elections ay tumitindi rin yung atake sa ating mga media practitioners. Actually last week, 'di ba, nabalitaan ko din sa pag-scroll ko sa social media. Isang example yung van ng ABS-CBN na kinuyog ng mga supporters ng isang certain politician na tatakbo this coming elections.
Grabe yung parang parang lynch mob ng elections. Nakatakot yung mga ganong instances, no? At kaya naman ngayon tuloy-tuloy lang ating usapan bilang parte na rin ng Altermidya Voters Education Project. Our event today was made possible through the collaboration of Altermidya, Bulatlat, and the international media support. At bukod sa webinar series na ito, parte rin ng aming Voters Education Project ang iba't ibang online and offline screenings at forums, social media, iba't ibang social media content, at syempre ang coverage sa papalapit na 2022 national elections. And I would also like to take this moment para i-welcome ang ating mga kasama sa Zoom at na mga from campus journalists to professionals. So magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat, no?
Yes, shout out sa inyong lahat dyan at sa ating mga FB Live viewers. At talaga namang magiging busy tayo sa coverage natin sa election season. Kaya naman, huwag niyong kalilimutang sundan ang iba't ibang alternative media outfits sa social media. At bilang kasama natin ngayon, ang iba't ibang mga organizations at ang mga publications, ang ating mga student media practitioners, live din tayo ngayon sa Facebook. Please like and share this video. Huwag din kayong mahihiyang mag-comment ng inyong insights habang tuloy-tuloy ang ating diskusyon. At speaking of diskusyon, Neil, ano nga ba ang topics natin for today?
I'm so glad you asked.
Yes.
What a wonderful question. This universe pala, no? Ngayong hapon, ilalahad sa atin ang guidelines for the media in covering the upcoming elections, no? So para sa mga kasamahan natin dyan sa media, let's take notes po, no? At bukod dyan, meron ding mga journalists na magbabahagi ng kanilang experiences at lessons na natutunan sa pagka-cover ng elections, both on a national and local level. Yan.
Wow! Hashtag wow!
Hashtag wow.
Mukhang magiging malaman ang ating tsikahan ngayong hapon, kaya naman huwag na nating patagalin pa ang mga eme natin, Neil. To start us off with our program, let us welcome Mr. Robbie Alampay, Philippine Coordinator for the International Media Support, to give us his opening remarks on the pledge of the Philippine media for a credible coverage of elections. Magandang hapon po, Sir Robbie.
Magandang hapon sa kanilang lahat. Magandang hapon po. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Gaya po ng banggit, I'm wearing two hats today. One is as Program Manager for the Philippines for International Media Support. So we would like to thank Altermidya for putting this together. Part 2 na to na mga diskusyon na binuo ng Altermidya para sa darating na eleksyon, para rin sa media, no? Both for the job that we have to do as well as for our own safety. To that point, I'm also wearing another hat. Napakiusapan ako ng Altermidya because, alam niyo naman po, kasama rin ako, kapatid din ako dito sa ating trabaho. And I am proud to be one of the signatories dito sa ginawa natin yung mga ilang buwan nang nakalipas, itong tinatawag natin na Wag Po Corrupt Pledge. Hindi naman to formal guidelines, but we're really quite proud and happy to say, I think the last time I checked with the conveners, mga 400 plus na yung mga signatories dito, both organizations as well as individuals signing on to a pledge to do our job. Not just to keep watch on the politicians and the political parties and all the stakeholders in the elections, but to recognize that we are stakeholders and we have our own accountability and we have our own responsibility. So I'm putting on my other hat as a fellow journalist and just as somebody who is proud to be a signatory here. Hindi ko na gagawing komplikado, babasahin ko just to remind all of us why we are here, not just for our safety but also for our responsibility. At ito ang linagdaan nating lahat. Every elections is a reckoning for democracy. As journalists reporting on another critical moment for our country, we have a duty to provide accurate, reliable, and essential information that will empower voters and encourage public discussion and debate. Citizens need issues and debates to be clarified, not simply amplified. And so we commit to the following. We commit to challenging and correcting baseless statements and claims. We will avoid highlighting or amplifying falsehoods and other harmful speech. We will report on the partisan activities of government officials, monitor the independence of all individuals and entities involved in conducting elections, highlight the public and private sector's efforts to uphold the integrity of elections. We will monitor campaign spending and use of public funds to win. We will contextualize reporting on surveys and the winnability of candidates. We will focus on voter education and participation, organize and report on town halls and debates, uphold codes of ethics and professional conduct, disclose potential conflicts of interest, make a clear distinction between reportage and opinion, promote safety for and among journalists. We will protect each other, and we will also share best practices in covering elections. Here's the point. Credible elections need credible media. Conversely, corrupted media can further corrupt politics. We can be part of the solution, but it starts with not being part of the problem. Kaya maraming salamat sa Altermidya for putting all of this together. And also to our panelists, Bacolod journalist Marchel Espina, FOCAP President Barnaby Lo, and of course, COMELEC Spokesperson James Jimenez. Mabuhay, and I wish all of us fruitful and meaningful discussions. Maraming salamat po.
Robbie, tama yung main takeaway natin dito ay credible elections need credible media. So yan po ang pledge ng ating mga mamamahayag ngayong darating na eleksyon.
At essentially at ultimately naman yung point ng journalism is public service, no?
Yes.
So kung hindi credible ang ating pagiging journalist, lalo na sa upcoming elections, no? Matatawag ba natin yung sarili nating journalist, no? Ganon. So, yan.
Mahalagang mga punto, no? So moving on to the next part of our program, we would like to introduce our first two speakers who will be sharing with us their experiences in covering the elections. We are joined by Barnaby Lo, who will be imparting with us his experiences in covering the elections on a national scale. He is a freelance broadcast journalist who contributes mainly to CBS News, Assignment Asia on CGTN, and Al Jazeera. He is also the president of the Foreign Correspondents Association of the Philippines, or FOCAP.
And also with us today is Marchel Espina, who will be sharing the lessons she learned in covering the elections on a local level. Yan. Ma'am Marchel is a Bacolod-based journalist who is the current chairperson of the National Union of Journalists, Bacolod, and a fellow of the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. She is also a reporter and editor for Digicast Negros and a correspondent for Rappler. She previously worked as a reporter for the Visayan Daily Star and editor-in-chief of Sunstar Bacolod. Yan. So everyone, please join us in welcoming Barnaby Lo and Marchel Espina. Yan. Magandang hapon po sa inyo.
Magandang hapon. Maraming salamat for that great introduction of both myself and Marchel, of course. Again, my name is Barnaby Lo. I'm the president of the Foreign Correspondents Association of the Philippines, and I am a freelance foreign correspondent. So meaning I work for the foreign media outlets on freelance basis. But I've been doing this since 2009. I've been a journalist since 2004, pero naputol, nag-masters ako, and then I worked in the States, and then I came back. So the first election that I covered was the 2010 election, and then 2013, 2016, 2019, and I will be covering this election again. Now, for foreign correspondents, medyo iba yung coverage namin. Kasi our host said, national scale ang kino-cover namin. We don't usually cover the local elections. So for example, for 2019 election, our main focus was if the opposition was gonna win or if administration candidate going to win. If there was going to be continuity of administration policies, or if there was going to be opposition going back to Congress and the Senate, and if there was going to be change in government. So medyo hindi medyo what do you call this, macro yung coverage namin when it comes to elections. But that doesn't mean that we're not covered by election safety issues. Of course, covered pa rin kami ng election safety issues. And I come from a generation of journalists na medyo at the crossroads. Kasi when I was starting, wala pang social media. And then in the middle of my career, nagkaroon ng Facebook, nagkaroon ng YouTube. Pero 2010 elections, 2013 elections, hindi pa masyadong utilized ang social media. During election campaigns. And then 2019, and then now, of course. Diba? So, safety has always been, you see me? Yeah, okay. So safety has always been an issue for journalists, whether us foreign correspondents or national correspondents or regional or provincial correspondents. Laging issue yung safety na yan. I think more so for regional and provincial correspondents. And of course, the starkest example of this is the Maguindanao massacre. It happened before the election campaign period, but it very clearly was election related. A lot of the journalists who were killed were regional journalists. Pero, I know for a fact na may a couple of members of FOCAP, actually photojournalists, were supposed to join this caravan going to Maguindanao. So hindi kami exempted, even though we work for foreign media outlets. If they had joined that caravan, they might as well have been victims as well. So hindi lang regional journalists yung maging victims, pati mga foreign correspondents as well. Siyempre now, iba naman ngayon yung mga safety issues. Siyempre with social media, there has been an increase in harassment of journalists, and we can expect that there will be even more during this election campaign period. Kanina na-mention yung crew cab ng ABS-CBN. It's something that from social media is translating to real world. And this is one of the dangers that we have to keep watch, and we really have to be careful. Kasi lumalabas na hindi na lang nasa social media, nagiging totoo na yung threat, yung harm sa atin. But we have to keep doing our jobs. We have to keep doing our jobs safely as we can. And of course, this is the first time that we are covering the elections during a pandemic. So different for this coverage. I'm sure that later James Jimenez will explain to us what the protocols are, what the rules are going to be. But we should self-regulate as well. Of course, our companies require us to be vaccinated. They require regular testing, and that's good. But we should be careful as well with choosing where to go, who to cover. I see a lot of coverage is based on what's being posted on social media. That's well and good. But we also, of course, have to go out and cover the election campaign, especially the official election campaign period. So yun na muna. I look forward to your questions. I hope I can answer your questions. Thank you.
Ayan, no, thank you very much, Sir Barnaby Lo. Before we proceed with Ma'am Marchel, no,
Yes.
maybe our participants in the Zoom room would like to ask questions. No, chat lang po kayo sa ating sa Zoom chat po natin. Ayan. What about you, Mensch? Ano
Yes.
yung napulot mo mula sa sa
Wait, before that,
talk
actually,
niyo, no?
gusto ko lang din i-remind na yung ating mga Facebook Live viewers, kung may mga questions kayo, ay ilagay nyo rin sa comment section ng ating live stream. So, habang naghihintay tayo, Neil, no, ng mga gustong magtanong na ating mga participants at viewers, magandang takeaway yung binabanggit ni Sir Barnaby, no, sa, ito ang first time, no, na magko-cover yung ating mga kasamahan sa media at a time of pandemic. So, meron ding mga, kumbaga, may particularities din doon sa mga pwedeng challenges na kaharapin ng ating mga kasamahan sa media.
Aside from real physical threats, no, may
Yes.
may health risks din na kaakibat ang pagka-cover ngayon sa election.
Yes.
So maya-maya nga po makakasama natin si Director James Jimenez of COMELEC, no, para ibahagi ang guidelines. Pero sa ngayon po naghihintay pa rin po kami ng inyong questions. Kaya kung gusto niyo rin po mag-on cam and mag-on ng mic para magtanong, pwede rin po 'yun. At sa ngayon, no, habang naghihintay tayo, i-acknowledge din natin ang ating mga kasamahan sa media na present ngayon. Mula sa alternative media, no? Mga alternative media outfits na kasama natin ngayon. Nandiyan ang Altermidya Panay, Paghimutad Negros, Panay Today, Southern Tagalog Exposure, Sock Sergeants Today, Bulatlat, CEGP, Film Weekly, Manila Today, Tudla Productions, Kilab Multimedia, at Davao Today, no? From ano talaga? From ano ba to? From Luzon and Visayas and Mindanao.
Yes.
Present ang ating alternative media outfit. So magandang hapon sa inyo, mga kasama. Hello po.
Yes, shout out sa inyong lahat. At
Shout out.
syempre, may mga kasama rin tayong mga media orgs ng journalists in attendance. At sila ay ang ABS-CBN, Rappler, UNTV, CNN Philippines, Internews, Daily Tribune, at TV5. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
Yan, no?
Alright.
At mukhang siguro feeling ko nag-iisip pa rin ng bigating questions ang ating mga participants
yes.
ngayon. So siguro isang bagsakan na lang natin mamaya, no. Let's hear first from Ma'am Marchel Espina. So Ma'am Marchel, hello po, magandang hapon po sa inyo.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just gonna share my screen. Or I have a presentation prepared. It's can you make co-host the other account, March Espina, ho? Kasi doon ako nag-share. Ako na lang. So again, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be sharing with you some of the lessons we've learned from the last elections. Okay. So first, of course, we have to monitor the social media. I know, I know you guys have been doing this, but just a very quick recap. Of course, in social media, there's where we can get tips, of course, source of news, rumors, and everything. Any ideas are there in social media? So it's, of course, it's just normal to monitor it. And of course, it's also nice for a newsroom to have somebody responsible to monitor this. There should be a editor, of course, and social media reporters who will scour the social media universe. And of course, aside from that, it's also nice to monitor the social media accounts of our candidates and officials, so wherein we can get an idea what's their stand on on issues, their opinions on certain issues, and of course their affiliations. Of course, aside from that, of course we have to be we have to practice our work as journalists. Even social media can be source of news and rumors and tips and anything. We should be, of course, you should verify those information, because again, those what we see on the internet, of course, is not all true. So of course, there are also media houses are also conducting polls, but again, it's not really reliable, because again, these are just subjective. I remember last time Rappler even took down their polls due to this, as it could again influence the public. So again, due to, I mean, before the pandemic, pre-pandemic, we seen community journalists of community houses, media houses have been struggling, especially in the newspaper. I came from a newspaper, and of course, our newspaper has been serving the community for almost 40 years. But when the pandemic struck, it made life harder because we were all terminated. But even though what had happened, many have again shifted to online journalism, and I came from a news outlet right now that was actually established just last year by ABS-CBN Bacolod reporters, and right now we're under online news. So right now, even with the pre-pandemic, the newspapers, everyone is again very aggressive online, because again, we have millions of users, Filipino users on Facebook. So it's up to us to reach out to them. And even right now, some of the outlets have shifted their focus not only to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, but also in TikTok. I've seen some media houses going to TikTok to influence some of their followers. So of course, in online journalism, we should also practice practical citizen oriented information. We should again educate our followers on the electoral process, registration, procedures, our rights, and of course backgrounds on issues, especially the candidates stand on certain policies. And of course, aside from that, as journalists covering the election, we should really understand the issue. We should not be spokesperson of a certain parties or candidates. Of course, in speaking in the setting of a local media and a local scene, we all know that journalists, of course, and sources or officials have close. There's that perceived closeness, but again, aside from that, media houses in the local scene are sometimes owned by the officials themselves. So there's what we call influence. When I was editor in a newspaper, it so happened that my boss is actually the father of the mayor of a city, not Bacolod, but an out of town city. But I think I was just lucky because the boss is not really he doesn't care what we do internally or in the editorial. He doesn't dictate what should be in the front page, what should be the stories up front. He doesn't even dictate what topics to write in editorial. But of course, being sometimes when I see hit the sun, if he has activities and all, of course he write something about it. But of course, he doesn't request. Okay, but sometimes when I put photos of his son on the front page, he would just text me and he say thank you. So, but it's not always. It's not always. But that's where the local scene goes. Sometimes my last newspaper, it was also our editor is also the sister of the mayor, the current mayor of Bacolod. I remember last election, I asked my editor if I can do a profile stories of all the candidates, meaning that includes the opponent. And I was again the editor. Well, she is even though she's the sister of the mayor, somehow I think she understands that it has to be done. So well, didn't even stop me. So when I went to the mayor's the opponent of the mayor's house, who was also a former mayor, he was actually shocked to see me there, and knowing that the outlet where I in. And then he said na he's thankful that we did a profile story on him, just so he can tell his plans and platforms. So that's how the local scene goes. It's hard sometimes for media, considering that the owners are also relatives or close kin of the incumbent official. So of course, there's also that political spin. So unfortunately, sometimes in the broadcast, in the radio, you would really see which side they are in, because of the way they attack. And sometimes there's that quote unquote propaganda, wherein they spin it and tell it as a fact. Aside from that, there are also in local media, there are also what we call black timing in radios. So that's where we draw the line. Local politicians love to purchase black time on radios. So I think it's also been happening, not only in local scene, but of course in the regions and other perhaps in national. So aside from that, I know the national media has been doing this, track again the broken promises of the politicians and the candidates. Not only in the first 100 days, but in 3 years. So what's their stand on issues? What's their policies? And of course, follow the money. Of course, who are the financier who finance the campaign and all, who's their supporters. You again find that conflict of interest. So let me just share this story. This happened in last elections. There's this small Negros Occidental town. It's called Moispadilla. But again, a few days before the election in 2019, or few months, it has garnered a national attention, and even the president went to this town. This has been a hot spot. The candidate there, a vice mayor who's running for mayor, few years earlier, she was nabbed in a checkpoint with her husband, and guns, grenade, and shabu were found in their car. I happened to interview her on the phone right after what had happened, and she insisted that it was all planted and she was manhandled. And of course, when I interviewed the police claim otherwise. But the interview doesn't really add up. The police said that, of course, they found the grenade near the stick shift. So if you have a car and you have a grenade, the grenade was put raw in the one where you put your coffee. So when the police told me that in the interview, parang it's too far-fetched, because I mean, if I have a grenade, I would not put it there. So I asked around with some of the local colleagues, and I discovered that he has a different statement to the other media. He said in the ABS that the grenade was found, and the firearms and the grenade were found in the back of the car, passenger seat at the backside, and then the other one is the passenger seat in the front side, and then the other one in the bag. So it's contrary to the initials, to the statement. So I reported in Rappler in Sunstar that the police had a contradictory statement. And then fast forward, okay, of course, the vice mayor at that time and the husband were again in prison. So fast forward to 2019. Few months earlier, she was able to post bail. Please note that, of course, possession of grenade is a non-bailable case. So she was able to post bail, and the judge ruled that the guns, the firearms, the shabu was fake, and then the police could not establish the grenade and all. So she was able to get out of prison. So see, that was a few weeks in April. So 2 weeks later, she was campaigning, and that's where it happens. She got ambushed. Her brother and the nephew were killed because they saved her. So it's again, it's a hot spot. She was up against the incumbent mayor at the time, which is her uncle. So this is why the president again went to the town. I covered in the town for for 2 days, I think. The people there are afraid to vote because we got a news that since this is a small town and they're a mountainous town, haciendas. So we got a report that time na there will be a blocking force, right? Wherein people or voters won't be allowed to pass through the area. They cannot get through the voting centers. That morning, of course, when the president came down there, he talked to the candidate, the vice mayor, and then of course the mayor, and then he urged the people to vote. On the election day, of course, people actually came out because, again, in fairness to the police and the army, they were at the area. Even the COMELEC was there. Commissioner Gonzon was, of course, a fellow Negrense. She was also there. Everyone was there. All eyes in Moise Padilla. And fortunately, there was no violence during the election day, and the people were able to vote. And of course, the vice mayor, she was elected as mayor. So the lesson there is that, again, understanding the issue, understanding the history of the political rivalry, you have to you have to know these things in order for you to provide a context to your readers. So that's giving you there's really an intense political rivalry in the local scenes, and unfortunately, we all know what had happened to Maguindanao. So okay, so aside from that challenges, there are many challenges. That's why it's very important that we plan our election coverage. So it's very crucial that we have to plan. So of course, for journalists, it's important for us to study the electoral laws, the voting system, the poll watching rules, the opinion surveys, of course, the political advertising. And it's just, it's important, of course, that we know this so we can, as teachers, quote unquote, we teach our readers and our followers, we make them understand. This is the reason why we need also to understand these rules, these election rules, for us to explain further and to make them, our readers, our followers, understand what's going on. So of course, in election, very important is the ethics. Well, sad to say is that, of course, we don't want to judge, but media, of course, they're taking advantage of by the officials and the candidates, considering that there's what we call low income or low payment or low salary, which is why the officials and candidates would take advantage of them. I remember when I was still starting as media, that was actually during the election period, and my mom gifted me a second-hand car, and they thought that it came from the governor. They even asked me how much I'm getting every month. I'm the payroll now. So I was actually shocked when I was asked those questions. Mind you, that was my first year in the media. I'm just still learning the craft, and so I realized at that time that you have to put a line between you and the officials and the source, that people would get the perception if you have a new cell phone or if you have a car, it really came from the source. So that's when I realized you have to put the fine line there. And of course, we have also to mind the conflicts of interest, especially the staff, and they can be compromised. They might make deals with politicians or candidates that could undermine the credibility of the outlet. And of course, last, this is also tackled earlier by Mr. Barnaby Lo. He mentioned about the election safety. Of course, there's no story worth dying for, because how can we report those critical stories if we're 6 feet underground? So yeah. I forgot, I probably missed something, but this one, the budget, of course, is also very important in election coverage, because you'll be, like, for example, me staying in Point Padilla for a few days, I submitted a budget for Rappler na I'll be needing this. So of course, budget is really important. So I'll be ending my presentation here. Thank you.
Insights to what covering the elections on a local level looks like, no? And kami nga ni-mention kanina pa napag-usapan namin na bilang mga taga-probinsya, I'm from Northern Samar, no? Mga taga-probinsya yung term, no? Yes. I'm from Northern Samar and you're from
Davao, Mindanao.
Davao, Mindanao, no, na pansin din namin, no, before na talagang napakaraming instances ng election-related violence sa regions outside of NCR. So ayun, thank you very much, Ma'am Marchel, again. And ngayon naman, no, bubuksan natin ulit ang floor for questions, no. So sa mga kasama natin sa Zoom, baka may mga tanong kayo dyan.
Yes, so yung ating mga questions ay addressed to both Sir Barnaby and Ma'am Marchel. So kanina recap lang, no, quick recap lang tayo. Si Sir Barnaby ay nag-discuss on how to safely cover the 2022 elections on a national scale bilang meron siyang mayamang karanasan bilang isang periodista at journalist when covering our national elections. And for Ma'am Marchel naman, ang kanyang itinalakay ay kung paano din haharapin yung mga challenges ng ating mga media practitioners na mas nakabase sa ating mga regions at local communities.
Yes. Ano yung mga, from Ma'am Marchel, ano yung parang nag-stand out sa'yo sa mga sinabi?
Actually, mahalagang takeaway actually for both, no? Yung value ng planning at yung pagiging maalam natin sa mga issues, both nationally and locally. Mahalagang weapon actually yun ng ating mga media practitioners when covering the national elections. Dun sa, mas gusto kong mag-particularize actually, Neil, dun sa mga pinagdadaanan ng ating mga local at regional media practitioners. For instance, sa amin sa Mindanao, totoo talaga na malakas yung political dynasty at influence nila during elections.
Yes.
Na most of the time talaga may tendency na mahawakan yung mga local media natin. Nagba-block time nga sila sa mga radio shows. Yeah. So how much more kapag elections na, no? How will they mobilize at utilize yung lahat ng machinery nila para sa elections?
Pati media, na namomonopolize.
Yes,
Na,
isang malaking struggle yon actually.
Tama, yun. So, and dahil din, no, na nakapag-touch on din si Ma'am Marchel sa parang dangers, no, ng covering the elections, local man or national, I would just like to remind everyone na noong unang part ng ating webinar series, Safely Covering the 2022 Elections, nagbahagi si Ma'am Kath Cortez and Sir JB Deveza ng ilang safety tips para naman mas relatively safe nating makover ang upcoming elections, no. So that video is still up on the pages of Altermidya, Bulatlat, as well as other alternative media outfit pages on social media. So if you would like, please check that video out.
Alright.
Yun.
Okay, so actually may mga pumasok na pong questions sa atin and very important, no? Taking off from the first discussion from Sir Barnaby, kung gaano din kahirap at extra yung layers na kakaharapin, especially at a time of a pandemic. So we have a lot of questions already na coming in. So wag na nating patagalin pa. Let's go to the first question. So this first question po is addressed to Sir Barnaby. Alright, so andyan pa po ba si Sir Barnaby?
Siyempre, andyan pa siya. Ano ka ba?
Diyan pa ba?
Andyan pa,
Ano
andyan pa
lang? Okay, pakiramdam. Alright, nakikita
Get
po
ready,
namin.
get ready,
Alright, so the
ganun.
first question po.
Okay, I'm here.
Alright pa.
Pero bago mo itanong sa akin yan, huwag mo na ako i-sir.
Okay.
Barnes na lang.
Okay, Barnes. Mensch po pala. Wow! Nag-plug ng sarili. Okay po, Barnes. Medyo nag-awkward ako. Alright, so the first question po is, what areas in election coverage do you find difficult getting information for your reports?
Okay.
I'm going to zero in on the current situation, because it's the pandemic. And hindi lang ito sa hindi lang ito sa election coverage. This has been happening for a year or two already, all throughout the pandemic actually. Mahirap kumuha ng information from any of the government offices and any of the politicians. Kasi whereas before, we can go to them, right? And we can do ambush interviews, right? And it's easier for us to go to government offices and courts to get documents and all that. Ngayon, madaming limitations. So we have to count on them to actually be the ones to provide us the information. Of course, meron silang mga media officers and dumami nga actually yung mga Viber groups and they send us press releases and they send us schedules of press conferences and stuff like that. Pero iba pa rin because there are instances where, for example, you have follow-up questions, for example. Hindi mo matanong. Let's use as an example yung yung laging handa, 'di ba? So you can send in questions, right? Pero hindi ka na makapag-follow up. And a lot of times during press conferences, hindi mo naman makukuha yung sagot mo doon sa pag tinanong yung tanong mo, tapos sinagot. Usually, alam naman natin lahat yan na meron tayong mga follow-up. So doon, medyo mahirap during this pandemic. And this will apply to election coverage as well, for sure. But then, in general, in my experience, pag election kasi, pag hindi kasi election, medyo mas mahirap lumapit sa mga politicians. Mas mahirap i-invite sila for interviews and stuff. Pero pag election, because they need to be able to campaign through the media, mas madali. So, medyo double-edged this pandemic kasi nga, ayun, mahirapan tayo na makita sila, to physically be able to visit them, to get information direct from them. On the other hand, during elections, they come to us naman. So hopefully, doon tayo sa they come to us.
That's interesting, no? Kasi supposedly itong public officials, no, and public agencies na, kasi ang public, di ba, dapat bukas sa publiko, pati ang information man na gustong i-seek ng public ay available dapat. But it seems na closed off sila sa pagbibigay ng mga ng relevant information. So that's very interesting, no? Lalo na ngayong pandemic na may limitations sa outright na pagpunta physically, no, sa mga himpilan para i-demand yung information na withhold. May ganun ka. So thank you very much, Sir Barnes. Wala na pa lang, sir. So ayun. So next question naman is addressed to magmamam pa po ba ako dyan? Hello po, Ma'am Marchel. Ayan. Ito yung question po natin, no? Ano po yung ethical dilemmas na pwedeng lumitaw sa pagko-cover natin sa isang kandidato at paano po ito haharapin?
Wag na, ma'am, oy. Well, as I've mentioned earlier, na the closeness, I guess, because again, media houses are mostly owned by politicians or somebody close to the politicians. So there's what we call how you approach your stories. Perhaps the editor sometimes will be compromised, considering that this is the owner we're talking about. So whatever the owner wants, he gets, right? I think that's the dilemma for every newsroom. Prior to Digicast Negros, I came for a newspaper, as what I've mentioned. Our editor was the sister. But we always get this notion we're supporting the mayor, even the people there are supporting the mayor. We always get that notion. And personally, I don't support anyone, okay? So I like what my editors are doing inside the newsroom. They're all of course, they're all our seniors, right? I like what they do inside the newsroom, because whatever stories we try, they would always call the reporters, hey, follow up with this person, even that person is the opponent of the existing administration. So I like what our editors are doing inside the newsroom. So that's why when people brand us na we're pro-mayor, always I always call them out, because I don't see that in the newsroom. So I think I'm just fortunate to be able to work with this kind of editors na despite na we are close to the officially we're close to the mayor. It's not seen in the newsroom. We're not even dictated by it. So but in the totals, in a totality, I think that's really a problem for every newsroom because of the closeness and and of course community media are, are cash trap. Okay, so if there's an opportunity to, to quote unquote partner or I don't know, collaborate, if that's the right term for that, I'm sure they would go for it, considering that again, there's what they call limited of resources. So I think that's the number one challenge for local media, and hopefully we can, we can pass all that in this, especially in this coming election we're in. Our coverages will be limited due to the pandemic.
Can I just add? Can I just add to that? This really is a perennial problem in the media industry here in the Philippines, where in Metro Manila, we're usually, well, I wouldn't say we're usually paid right, but we're paid relatively poor.
Kami were paid less.
I was gonna say that Metro Manila journalists are all paid right, but well, that's not true, no. So relatively better than our journalists in the provinces, So this conflict of interest is a perennial problem, because what do you do when you're not making enough money doing journalism, right? So when you're getting paid, say 200 pesos per photo, right? Or when you're getting paid 2,000 pesos for a radio show. Meron talagang ganon. How can you raise a family? How can you feed your family? So this is the root of that problem of conflict interest, really. And it's not easy to solve because, as Marchel said, hindi naman kumikita na malaki yung mga community papers, yung mga community radio stations. Babalik na naman tayo sa ABS-CBN. That's why it's so tragic na nawala yung mga regional stations ng ABS-CBN, because now we're, in the provinces, we're left with these smaller radio stations, smaller TV stations, smaller community papers that may not be able to pay as much because they're not making as much. And then dugtong-dugtong na yan because hindi nga sumusweldo ng tama yung mga tao, then kailangan nilang, some of them have to, kailangan kumapit sa mga politiko. And when they do their radio shows, they have to attack the opposing politician because that's the deal with the politician who pays them. And that endangers their lives. It could lead to the killings in those places. So dugtong-dugtong and the root of all this is the pay, the very low pay in these provinces and regions in the Philippines. Yeah, so I just wanted to make that point.
Just to add to that, so just to give you the context, when I was editor, yung pay ko is just 20,000. I'm the only editor in the paper, daily newspaper, 12 pages. And I learned that the 20,000 rate is just an entry level or entry reporter rate sa Manila. And there's that big disparity when we, in terms of responsibilities.
Sino yung 20,000 na entry reporter? 10,000 ako
I've learned from one of the editors sa Manila na when she was actually shocked to learn that's my salary. And then she said na this is just a salary of entry reporter sa Manila. So, yun. Just to give you the context na maliit talaga yung sahod. For newspapers, our entry, yung sahod for entry reporters for a newspaper here, 7,000. So 7-8 yun. But yung iba, they started 7,000. Yun.
Hello. Okay, maraming salamat po kay Barnes at Marchel para sa mga interesting answers no, sa ating question. So more to come pa po, maraming nakalista sa ating mga Facebook Live viewers at Zoom participants. Pero gusto ko lang, bago natin tanungin no, yung next question, gusto natin mag-take away doon na yung ethical dilemma na kinakaharap ng ating mga media practitioners talaga. Mahalagang punto yung ini-raise ng ating speakers na rooted din siya doon sa current situation, even media labor, yes, labor situation and economic situation na kinakaharap ng ating mga media practitioners. Nagulat ako, naglapagan tayo ng mga sahod. And very reflective siya sa kung ano yung kalagayan ng media sa ating bansa.
And ano rin, no, may point din na despite the very relevant and important role of the media in the country, no, in bringing out the truth, no, or of doing the job of being truth tellers.
Yes.
The pay, the compensation is so little, no, para mabuhay at ma-continue, ma-sustain yung ganitong profession. So it's very bleak to put it.
Malalim ang hugot natin dyan sa ganyang usapin. Anyway, moving on po no, sa ating open forum part. This next question is addressed to Barnes. So, ang question ay, if we want to focus on campaign financing, can you give us tips on how to trace funding sources of candidates? Interesting question po.
Pera ulit, no?
Okay. Let me just preface, before I answer that question, let me preface my answer by saying that so I was never that kind of journalist na investigative journalist who traces finances like PCIJ journalists are. But I do have experience from when I was at GMA7 tracing corruption. I did the story on ghost projects in the provinces. And so you just, you follow the money, really. So you start by, sana we can start with the SALN, pero medyo mas mahirap na kasing kumuha ng kopya ng SALN ngayon. But that is really the most basic document for politicians because then you can see how much they're declaring, di ba? Pero naman din kasi yung campaign finances, the money comes from a lot of different donations. And usually, actually, hindi natin siya makita yung kabuuan until after the campaign season when they submit their campaign finances. So partial, we can see them during the campaign season. Pero hindi mahirap siyang buuin while they're still campaigning and we're still in the middle of the election, but we have to keep at it. So konti-konti ipunin natin, tingnan natin kung ano yung mga sinasubmit nila ng mga documents in terms of campaign finances. And then at the end of the election period, when they're able to submit all the documents, we have to look at them. We have to check if they followed religiously campaign finance rules. And I think Director James Jimenez of the COMELEC is already here, and he probably can talk more about that later. But it is part of the job of us journalists to check on how candidates, national candidates as well as local candidates, are spending money because there are rules governing this.
Ayun, thank you very much, Barnes, no? Even sa usapin din ng ng kung saan yung nagagaling yung mga budget ng iba't ibang kandidat. Napakahirap din, and sa sinabi ni ni Barnes, no? Parang they're giving just pieces of the puzzle na parang nasa duty talaga ng journalist na i-piece together mga ganitong kasi rin, no, sa based on mga previous instances din ng ganito na pagsisik ng mga financial statements from politicians, candidates, no, mahirap talaga at ayun, yun yung point na kailangan tayo bilang journalists ay parte na ng trabaho natin yun para malaman ng wider at broader Filipino audience natin. So, ayun, Tari, thank you very much for answering the questions that our participants sent in, Barnes, March. At mamaya, meron pang questions actually, pero baka pwede natin balikan na mamaya, no?
Yes,
Kasi
balikan.
nakapasok na po ngayon ang next speaker natin, no? Si Commission on Elections Spokesperson Director James Jimenez. At kanya namang ilalahad ngayon ang guidelines for the media in covering the 2022 elections. Ayan, so huwag natin patagalin pa. Good afternoon, Sir James. Yes, we can hear you, sir. Very clearly. Yan.
Yeah, tayo nawawala-wala, pero okay na. Yes. Okay. Magandang hapon at hello. Hi. Can you hear me? Parang hindi ko kayo naririnig.
Yes po. Narinig ko po, sir.
Okay. All right. Sige, good. All right. So thank you very much. Maraming salamat po, no, sa pag-imbita nyo sa COMELEC. Ang dapat na sana dumating dito ay si Commissioner Guanzon, pero unfortunately she's not available, so ako muna ang inyong representative. Pasensya na po kayo. Anyway, so let's talk about media matters, no? And let me just share my screen. Okay, we will structure this presentation this way. No, we will have 3 parts. First, we'll talk about coverage in the new normal. Basically, kung ano ang nakikita nating mga proseso at anong mga challenges ang hinaharap ng coverage pagdating sa eleksyon, lalo na sa panahon ng pandemya. And kailangan natin pag-usapan syempre yung media accreditation bilang yan ang talagang entry point natin dito sa coverage na gagawin natin sa darating na halalan. And finally, we'll delve into the rights and responsibilities of journalists as we see them in the coming elections. All right? So, without further ado, dito sa coverage ng new normal, obviously, medyo malaking pagbabago, malaking adjustment ang gagawin natin. Dito sa slide na to, makikita ninyo yung basic rules para sa coverage doon sa mismong election day. Okay? Dahil, let's face it, election day lang naman talaga ang lugar kung saan may control ang COMELEC. No? Noon, bago magsimula yung buong election period na to, sinasabi natin, nasa 4 na lugar lang tayo magkakaroon ng talagang matinding regulation pagdating sa new normal. Una-una yung sa pagsasagawa ng mga convention, sa pag-file ng COC, sa mismong election day, at sa canvassing. Since tapos na tayo dun sa mga conventions at sa filing ng COC, nandito na tayo sa mismong election day. And sa election day, ang mangyayari dyan is that these events will unfold at voting centers nationwide. No? So just a little bit of definition, yung voting center, yan yung eskwelahan kung saan nagaganap yung halalan. This is the school where the elections are actually held. Now, within the voting... Okay.
Ito kuya, yung health declaration.
All right. Sorry. Sige. Now, within the voting center, nandyan yung mga individual classrooms kung saan nagaganap yung actual voting. Yan yung precinct, no? In this presentation, we will call those places precincts. But sa pagsusulat natin at sa discussions natin, usually nagiging interchangeable yung precinct at saka polling place. But just again, for clarity, when we talk about a precinct, we're referring to the place where voting actually takes place, kung saan nandun yung makina at nandun yung Board of Election Inspectors. Voting center is the big school where all of these little precincts are located. Okay, so only accredited media will be allowed to enter the voting centers. Right off the bat, I can tell you that very restricted ang access doon sa mga voting centers, and kahit na media ka, kung hindi ka accredited media, malamang hindi ka papapasukin. Now, second item, you have to present a negative antigen test. Now, that could be a negative PCR test also. Pwede yan. A negative antigen test will have a validity of 24 hours. A negative PCR test will have a validity of 72 hours. So, kailangan mo pakita na meron kanyan. Now, pag pinakita mo na, huwag mong iiwan yung proof mo doon sa pintuan. Pagpasok mo sa voting center, because every time you go into a polling place or a precinct inside the voting center, kailangan mo ipakita ulit yon. So, wag mo siyang iiwan dun sa entrance ng voting center. You are going to have to pass a health screening also before you're allowed to enter. So, dadaan ka muna sa health screening. But for practical purposes, that's mostly just a visual examination of you as well as a temperature check. And when I mean visual examination, hindi ko sinasabing i-examining ka talaga. Titingnan lang kung kumuha kang kumuha ka may sakit or whatever. Of course, the people who will be guarding the voting centers will be people who will be aware of what a COVID suspect might actually appear, umuubo, looking feverish, etc. But ultimately, there is the temperature check. So, makakalusot pa rin tayo dyan kung wala naman tayong lagnat. On site, the media will be provided a holding area. Now, this is the third major difference that you will probably expect to see, because dati, in regular elections, wala naman tayong holding area talaga. There's no specific place that's designated for media, because for the most part, media is really expected to be all over the place. Tinitingnan yung mga lugar. But because of COVID, and because we want to make sure na hindi tayo papupuno yung mga voting centers, magkakaroon ng holding area ang media. Access to the precinct, of course, the classroom, shall be at the sole discretion of the electoral board. Meaning to say, kung gusto natin pumasok sa presinto, in order to cover, kailangan tayo magpaalam doon sa electoral board, because the number of people, including members of the media, who will be allowed inside the precinct shall be, at all times, be under the sole discretion of the electoral board. Meron silang discretion dyan para sabihin kung sino pwedeng papasukin at sinong pwedeng hindi, at sinong hindi, at kung gaano sila katagal mananatili sa loob ng presinto. Okay? Of course, minimum health standards will be in effect, which means that everyone who goes into the voting center will be expected to wear face masks and, unfortunately, face shields. Now, the thing about face shields, though, is that lumabas yung guidance namin tungkol dito. Nire-require pa ang face shield ng IATF. So, right now, people are talking about maybe relaxing that rule since nirelax na rin naman ng IATF. But right now, as the rules stand, everyone is required to still wear face masks and face shields. Now, upon entry to the precinct, as I said earlier, the media shall immediately identify themselves to the electoral board, presenting their media cards coming from the COMELEC. Any identification they might have will also be useful, as well as their negative antigen or RT-PCR tests. Diba? Sabi ko sa inyo, kailangan pakita natin yung negative result ng test natin. Now, within the polling place, we will have to ask that media refrain from speaking to voters in the precinct or in the voting center itself. Right? Kasi again, like I said, nandun kayo sa holding area, posibleng may makausap kayo ng mga botante, dinidiscourage po natin yan. No? We're also asking media to refrain from taking photographs of filled up ballots. Now, okay, a lot of people, normally pag sinabi mo bawal ang ganito, bawal ang ganyan, ang susunod na tanong, bakit anong gagawin niyo pag nagawa namin? Or pag nahuli kami, anong gagawin? Ano bang, may penalty ba yan? Well, meron. Of course, if you refuse to abide by the rules, there is a possibility na matanggal yung ating accreditation. And as you can tell, accreditation is very important because you will not be able to go into any of these official functions without media accreditation. So, isa yan sa mga consequences ng hindi pagsunod ng rule. You could be kicked out of the polling center, you could be kicked out of the precinct, you could be kicked out of the voting center, and you could be stripped of your accreditation if you refuse to follow the rules. Just to point out that these rules are not for the benefit of the COMELEC, they are for the safety of the voters. No? Sila ang pinakamahalaga dito at hindi naman tayo. Okay? So, yan po yung overall kumbaga overview ng coverage of the new normal. And the things that we can take away from this is, number one, hindi na free access sa lahat ng lugar. No? Magkakaroon na ng mga checkpoints na katulad ng ng health screening bago tayo makapasok sa isang lugar. So number 2, kailangan natin siguraduhin na credentialed tayo. This is very important. No? Na credentialed tayo, meron tayong media accreditation. And number 3, we have to abide by the rules. Dati kasi medyo very liberal ang treatment sa media. No? May mga stories tayo of reporters on election day really having the run of the place. Kasi nga, of course, nagko-cover. And we understand why that's important. Pero right now, with the conditions being as they are, binabalanse naman natin, syempre, yung freedom na binibigay natin na dapat ini-enjoy ng media versus yung pangangailangan sa orderly administration of the elections nang hindi naman ma-endanger yung mga botante. Okay? So ito po yung overall na overview ng coverage in the new normal. Now let's talk about media accreditation because as I said, it's a very important part of the new regime. Right? So media accreditation, who may be accredited? Of course, yung journalists, right? And in this listing, they're all specified kung anong medium nila, pero alphabetically arranged. No? So we're going to accredit bloggers, we're going to accredit community journalists, documentary makers, feature filmmakers, novelists, online journalists, photojournalists, playwrights, print journalists, professional photographers, professional videographers, public relations contractors, radio journalists, screenwriters, television journalists, and television production people. As you can see, this is a very broad range of people who can be accredited as media. No? So media is pangkalahatang tawag natin dyan. Pero ay expect natin, ang pinakamarami nating applications, of course, will be coming from yung media practitioners natin, mainstream media, mga reporter, mga cameraman, etc., mga photog. Pero in-expect din natin, especially ngayon, dadami siguro ang dating ng mga bloggers at community journalists. At alam natin na malaki ang kontribusyon ng dalawang grupo na yan sa pagbuo ng ating information landscape. So, these people will be allowed to be accredited, no? Will be eligible for accreditation, I should say. Pero may proseso. Siyempre, hindi naman bigla-bigla nang sasabihin mo, okay, journalist ako, bigyan mo ako ng accreditation. Hindi naman ganun, siyempre. So we have some requirements. First, you need to fill out a COMELEC media accreditation form. This form is available on the website, comelec.gov.ph, and you will be required to present two recent 1.5 inch photograph. Parang, hindi ako nagkakamali, parang passport size yan. So, where applicable, an endorsement from the publisher, editor-in-chief, etc., of the news organization employing the applicant must be attached to the application form, right? So, mag-apply tayo, kasama natin yung endorsement. Ngayon, kung broadcast ka or film naman yung ginagawa mo, well, kung sino man yung authorized mag-distribute ng work. So, magbibigay ng endorsement letter. In the case of freelancers, a valid assignment letter from the bona fide media organization for which the freelancer is on assignment. Yan ang kailangan natin. Okay? So, bottom line, kailangan may endorsement nung ating humihingi ng accreditation. But there are exceptions, of course. No? For example, when we're talking about freelancers, a freelancer may be accredited if the freelancer is on assignment and endorsed by a professionally recognized organization. So, walang problema dyan. Pero, special case, kung meron silang previous accomplishments which are highly visible, respected, or widely recognized, no endorsement is needed. So, ibig sabihin, yung mga tao naman tayong kilalang freelancers na talagang alam naman ng marami kung sino sila, pwede na silang ma-accredit. COMELEC can take cognizance of their body of work. Bloggers must prove that they are in fact bloggers. No? They must submit the URL of their blog. Submit printed copies of articles recently published. The website must, of course, be regularly updated. Dahil dito, personal websites and fan sites are ineligible. Okay? So, kung meron ka lang ay isang Facebook account, baka hindi siguro pwede yon. Kasi, unless ang gamit mo sa Facebook ay katulad ng gamit ng mga community journalists ngayon na talagang ginagawa nilang media outlet yan. Pero kung personal Facebook account lang, hindi naman siguro. No? Blogs must be well established and updated. Ibig sabihin, talagang nagpa-function sila as a news source. Then pwede silang maging eligible for accreditation. But of course, all of this, lahat ng instances of accreditation will be at the discretion of the COMELEC. COMELEC ang magbibigay ng accreditation or hindi. The deadline for filing applications for accreditation is March 11, 2021. Basically, you can start now, right? Kasi lumabas na yung resolution, na-publish na, effective na yan. So, pwede na kayo magsimulang mag-apply for media accreditation. Kung national media kayo, meaning to say, you're operating, like for example, dito sa NCR, and then pwede kayo mag-file ng application dito sa office ko sa Education and Information Department or EID. Kung foreign and other media, ibig sabihin yung mga bloggers, etc. Dito rin sa EID. Kung local media naman, pwede kayo mag-apply sa Office of the Provincial Election Supervisor sa probinsya kung saan kayo naroon. Right? Okay. Incomplete filings will not be processed. Remember, meron tayong requirements dun sa application form. Meron tayong mga required na attachments, particular sa mga bloggers, etc. Kung incomplete ang inyong filing, hindi naman kayo sasabihan, hindi kayo wawarningan or anything, but they will not be considered not filed. So it's your responsibility to make sure na kompleto yung filing ninyo at tinanggap ng COMELEC for processing. Kung sa tingin nyo medyo natatagalan yung resulta ng accreditation, I would suggest na lumapit na kayo at alamin nyo kung ano ang problema. Okay? Sa dami na mag-a-apply, baka hindi kayo matawagan. Okay. Right. Okay. So let's talk about the rights and responsibilities of media. Accredited media will be allowed maximum access to all stages of the electoral process. Okay. This includes, but is not limited to, preparatory activities, command conference, etc. All others related activities organized and conducted by the COMELEC and its accredited citizens' arms. I think this is very important kasi in the past, tinatanong kami, pwede kami mag-attend sa trabaho ng COMELEC pero pwede ba kami mag-attend sa mga ginagawa ng accredited citizens' arm? I think this is to make it very specific that yes, pwede kayong mag-attend sa mga activities ng things like NAMFREL or PPCRV kahit na nakaligtaan nila kayong imbitahan. All right? Now, of course, this sort of access is subject to such conditions as may be necessary for the protection of COMELEC personnel, property, privileged information, and the integrity of the elections. Ibig sabihin, meron naman din talagang limitations. No? Hindi naman absolute yung right natin to access. And there will be instances when there will be closed door meetings, there will be procedures that will not be open for coverage. But please rest assured na pasok yan dito sa mga conditions na to kung bakit hindi natin pinapa-cover for media. Subject also to existing health protocols. Ibig sabihin, kung kayo ay dumalo sa mga ganong klaseng events, we expect you to abide by the health protocols that are in place as well. Face mask, if necessary, a face shield, social distancing, and so on. Okay? So, let's talk about the rights and responsibilities of the media as it relates to the elections. As far as the COMELEC sees it, as far as we're concerned, nakikita natin that media has three basic roles. Media as watchdog, media as the voice of the public, and media as a public educator. Let's talk about media as a watchdog. We understand, at least in the COMELEC, we understand that the media performs a very critical function of holding the election management body, kami, accountable. Okay? You do this by ensuring transparency. Paano ba to? Ito yung basically in your reporting, nilalabas ninyo yung ginagawa namin at kung may nakikita kayong mali, pino-point out din ninyo. Diba? This is very important because an accountable electoral management body is a critical element to free and fair elections. It is essential to the integrity of the electoral process. But more than holding the election management body accountable, we expect that media will also hold the candidates to account by reporting on their actions, calling out their misrepresentations, and interrogating their promises. Ano ibig sabihin? Reporting their actions, everyone does that, right? I mean, ginagawa na natin yan. And there have been a lot of instances when there's excellent reporting on medyo questionable things done by candidates. No? Nangyayari na yan. But we need to see more of people calling out misrepresentations made by candidates. Ang tendency kasi is, pag sinabi ng kandidato, nagfo-fall back tayo dun sa sabi nila kind of reporting. No? Yung sabi nila kind of reporting, that's, well, it performs a function, di ba? Nire-report na sinabi nila. Pero kung dun ka titigil na sinabi nila, parang kulang, di ba? Parang, ano ngayon kung sa sinabi nila? Tama ba yung sinabi nila? Totoo ba yung sinabi nila? What they said, is it fair? So, kailangan natin pasukin yung extra mile na yun, di ba? So that if ever they misrepresent themselves, and they tend to do this, no? There's colorful exaggeration, there's hyperbole, etc. If we don't call that out, then we might be doing a disservice to the public, right? And to the electoral system as a whole. And finally, we must interrogate their promises. No, one of the problems that we've seen in the past is that kapag nangako ang kandidato ng something, no, as a campaign promise, nire-report na natin with breathless excitement. Na, naku, sabi niya, ganito gagawin niya, ganyan. But do we ever ask, what will that cost the people later on? Right? If someone promises you, for example, a railroad that connects Luzon to Visayas to Mindanao, do we ask, how much is that going to cost? How are the people going to pay for it? Are you going to be displacing local communities pag kinuha mo na yung lupa for your railroad? So, usually kasi, namamangha tayo sa pangako na hindi na natin na-interrogate yung nasa likod ng pangako, yung foundation ng pangako. No? And in the end, nagugulat ngayon yung publiko na dapat naman hindi nagulat, di ba? Kasi napag-usapan na nga yan, di ba? So kung napag-usapan man, medyo mababaw sometimes yung pangungusap. So kailangan, function ng media as a watchdog is to actually interrogate those promises. No? Not to take the promises at face value, but to determine whether or not these promises have an actual prayer of doing what it's supposed to do. Right? There's nothing wrong with media being, exercising just this sort of critical function. Of course, media is also the voice of the public. Media provides a platform for the public sentiments all the time. And media does this very well now, no? Especially with the rise of social media. Nakikita natin na in many instances, yung media, parang sila yung nag-amplify nung mga naririnig nila from the public. Pero of course, merong responsibility pa rin ang media to make sure na when they do this, when they amplify the voice of the public, hindi nila napapabayaan yung kanilang yung task nila of truth telling. Syempre, no? For example, just a very recent example, no? Itong usapin tungkol sa accreditation, itong verification ng account, right? Verification ng account in order for a candidate to push a campaign ad on social media. Naging mainit na topic yung YouTube, kung saan gusto maglabas ng ads ng mga maraming kandidato. Yung requirement for verification seems to be 100,000 followers, no? So okay, so some candidates medyo nag-issue doon, ganyan, nag-ingay sila, ganyan. Tapos pinaliwanagan naman sila na kung kandidato, hindi naman din i-require na 100,000. No? You would have thought that would have been the end of it. Kaso hindi. No? So naging issue ngayon na parang etong isang kandidato, kailan ba to na verify? No? So I claimed that the candidate was verified before they reached 100,000. And so nagkaroon ngayon ng reporting kung saan pinagsabong yung statement ko versus yung statement ng supporters, right? So, ang ganda, ang sarap basahin ng balita kasi sabi ng supporters, hindi siya hindi siya verify nung until umabot siya ng 100,000. Tapos sabi ni Jimenez, naku, sabi ni Jimenez, hindi pa daw umaabot ng 100,000 na verify na. Pero hindi sila nagtutugma. And then the story ends there. Right? So mukha ngayong merong conflict, mukhang may disconnect na yun dun sa dalawang narrative na yun. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is because if it had not been a he said, they said kind of reporting, then the report should have shown, number one, even on YouTube's own frequently asked questions, nakalagay doon na you sometimes allows verification even if the person doesn't have 100,000 followers. Malinaw, nakalagay doon sa mismong sagot ng YouTube na posibleng magkaroon ng verification kahit hindi ka pa umaabot ng 100,000 pero hindi na i-report 'yon, right? Pangalawa, ang ginamit na basis nung pinagsasabong dun sa statement ng COMELEC is a screenshot that, again, with some research on the part of the reporting, would have been revealed as a screenshot of the mobile platform of YouTube. And the mobile platform of YouTube does not show a verification badge, right? So, dun pa lang yung inilalabas na parang ebidensya doon sa contrary report sobrang faulty na pala, right? Because it was essentially a misrepresentation, right? Kasi sinasabi, tignan niyo, may screenshot kami, sa screenshot wala pang verification badge, therefore walang verification na nangyari. This was misrepresentation because ang pinapakitang screenshot was actually from a platform that really does not show verification badges, regardless of whose profile you're looking at. And number three, again, a simple research would have shown or would have revealed that even if you showed a screenshot at let's say 100,000, that doesn't mean na dun lang siya na screenshot, right? Doon lang siya na verify. So basically, what I'm saying is that magandang naging voice of the public yung media in this case. But even as a voice of the public, kailangan may gatekeeping pa rin, no? Hindi pwedeng just because sinabi nung nagrereklamo, yun na yung storya. Kasi hindi yun ang storya, di ba? Ang storya is meron ba talagang problemang nangyari? Right? So we hope that when we enable public discussion, we're also not letting go of media's role as a watchdog then, no? Not just of the election management body, not just of the things people say, but of these allegations as well. And finally, we see a role for media as public educator. Napakahalaga na ang media becomes part of the process of educating the voters. Tama that media plays a critical role in ensuring the integrity of elections, but it's also to be desired that media should play a role in creating a generation of informed voters. So napakahalaga na meron tayong education function, not just to focus on allegations of wrongdoing, in 2012, there was some reporting about an activity that was, well, it's some observers saw thing that they did not understand. So sila naiintindihan explanation forthcoming, into a huge scandal about how this should not have been done, etc., how the fix is on, ganyan. Most of the reporting focused on the allegations of wrongdoing. No? Most of the reporting focused on the story na may nangyari. Remember, nandiyan yung allegation, nandiyan yung duda, nandiyan yung skepticism, nandiyan yung pangamba na merong maling ginagawa. Pero, kabaliktaran yan, with some effort, madidiscover naman kung talaga nga bang may mali. Right? With some effort, madidiscover naman kung yung prosesong kini-question ay may dahilan kung bakit ganoon. Or merong tamang prosesong sunod na hindi lang natin nakikita lahat, no? And it's very important that media perform that so that we're not getting all hung up on speculations. Because kung marami ang speculation at unaddressed yan, medyo matitwist na yung kabuuan ng kwento. Hindi na natin makikita yung buong picture and the public, while riled up and activated, would not be well informed. No? So yun po yung nakikita natin na challenges at rights and responsibilities natin dito sa coverage sa New Normal. And this is very true because of course we exist in a very hyper-polarized environment now. So everyone is a little more sensitive than they used to be, and every little thing tends to get blown out of proportion. And media has to be the sober and guiding hand to help us navigate through this new information landscape. Maraming salamat po. If you have any questions, I would gladly answer them. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Sir James, para sa pagbabahagi ng guidelines from COMELEC. But before we let you go po, dahil alam naming busy kayo, we will open the forum for a few questions. For sure po, yung ating mga Zoom participants na media practitioners from the alternative media outfits and other friends from other media outfits po ay may mga katanungan. So sa mga gusto pong magtanong, you may ask the question po na kayo po mismo, just unmute yourselves. Or pwede rin pong i-type natin ang ating mga questions sa ating Zoom chat.
May I ask, Sir James,
Yes.
a question that's unrelated to your
presentation, because I have a follower on Twitter who wants to ask you a question about the party list approvals. So he's asking bakit daw pinayagan yung Agimat party list while ang Nurses
Okay, Vance, go
United
ahead.
at ang Ladlad. Yes, nadinig lahat. Yeah. So he's asking bakit daw pinayagan ng Agimat party list pero ang Nurses United at ang Ladlad, who represent truly disenfranchised and embattled sectors, bakit daw na-deny?
Okay, thanks, Barnes. I hope I can call you Barnes.
Oh,
I actually responded to this question when it first came out. I even wrote a blog post about it. But let me just refresh that reply. No, the first thing you have to look at pag nakakita kayo ng ganitong klaseng disconnect is tignan nyo, ano ba yung karakter o ano ba yung nature ng party list organization na pinag-uusapan natin. So you have in this case, Agimat and Nurses United. All right? Nurses United presents itself as a sectoral party. Okay? Sectoral party. Agimat filed for accreditation as a political party. All right? So yung isa sectoral, isa political party. Now, look at the law, right? So, alam mo na kaagad na may pagkakaiba yung dalawa. They are not the same. So, doon pa lang alam mo na mahirap sila i-compare. Apples and oranges. Kasi yung isa sectoral party, yung isa political party. Party list law, merong iba't ibang klaseng organisasyon ang pwedeng sumas kinds of sectoral parties and a political party. Yung sectoral party, nakalagay sa mismong batas, sectoral party nga eh. So, in order for them to be accredited, they need to show that a majority of their members belongs to that sector. Okay? Sectoral party needs to prove that their members represent the sector. Versus a political party. A political party does not need to represent a sector. Under the law, a political party is not required to show that they have magkaiba ang requirement, hindi ba? Magkaiba ang question, magkaiba ang requirement. So, kung magkaiba ang requirement, magkaiba ang treatment, right? So, ano nangyari sa Nurses United? Ang nangyari sa Nurses United, sabi ng division, sabi niya, hindi pinatunayan ng Nurses United na sila ay may majority members na nurses. No? In fact, kung tama ang tanda ko doon sa decision, they did not even allege that they represented nurses. That I could probably be wrong about that. But bottom line, sabi ng division, hindi ninyo pinakita na nagre-represent kayo. Either hindi nila inallege or hindi sila nagpakita ng pruweba na yung member sa kanila yung pruweba na yan is because they, as opposed to Agimat, which was seeking accreditation as a political party. Again, as a political party, walang ganong requirement. And so, kung nag-fail ang Nurses United to discharge that responsibility, the responsibility to prove that they have a majority of nurses in their numbers, then yes, hindi siya mabibigyan ng accreditation. If I'm not mistaken, this was the same problem with Ladlad before. Ladlad filed as a sectoral party and hindi nila din napatunayan kasi hindi nila inallege, no? Or hindi sila nagbigay ng patunay na yung members nila come from the sector that they're supposed to represent.
Oh, okay.
Right? So that's the main difference.
I understand the explanation. And it's okay, so maybe let's not go into the comparison. But Nurses United, they claim that they gave COMELEC their license numbers.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that would show that the majority of them are nurses and that they represent the sector that they want to represent.
Yes, this is how they characterized it, Barnes. This is their claim. They claimed that the information they gave was enough. But I guess the division didn't see that it was enough. And that's not something I can debate with, right? Now, I don't know what they presented, and neither do you. No one does, right? Sila lang ang nagsasabi na yan ang present nila. We take them at their word.
According to Nurses United, license numbers, RN license numbers.
Okay, but
Their nurse license numbers.
Okay. Again, so again, I don't want to litigate this because we're not appreciating the evidence as the commission division did, right? Because we're not sitting in judgment of this case. We're just saying that ito yung sinabi nila. But I can think of a situation where that would not be enough, right? I can think of a situation where that would not be enough. They would have to prove kasi that their member, who is a proven member of the organization, is really the holder of that license number. Diba? How can you prove that? I can think of a number of ways, right? But to my mind, and just looking at it objectively, just because you give me a person's registration number, kung hindi ko naman mapuprove yung number na yon as an actual valid number, then that would be pointless, diba? I mean, you get what I'm saying? I can give you a bunch of numbers, but if these numbers are not properly alleged or proven to establish the fact that they are in fact nurses, then that would probably not be acceptable. Right? I'm not saying that this is exactly what happened,
Mm.
but as you said, if you're just telling me that they gave numbers, I can give you 100 reasons why that would not be acceptable.
Okay. Well, I don't know if they showed their actual PRC cards, in fact.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's okay. Marami pang tanong yung mga ibang tao, so I'm not going to elongate this.
No,
this
well,
discussion
let
is
me just
probably
address something that's on the chat box. On the chat box kasi sabi, but PLs should be reserved for marginalized sectors, right? No, they should not be reserved for marginalized sectors. This was the ruling in Atong Paglaom in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, kung saan sinabi ng Korte Suprema na hindi exclusive sa marginalized and underrepresented sectors ang party list. We might want it to be like that, but it is not like that. It was not like that by design, in fact. What happened was that after the initial implementation of the party list system, ang nangyari, nagkaroon ng series of sulat na dapat pang marginalized at underrepresented sectors lamang ang party list organization, ang party list elections. Pero doon sa Atong Paglaom nga, ni-reverse ng Supreme Court yung sarili niya. At sabi ng Supreme Court, teka, hindi yan ang intensyon ng batas. The law never intended for this to be exclusive for marginalized or underrepresented sectors. That it was in fact a mechanism to open up the electoral process, and that means hindi siya exclusive to marginalized and underrepresented sectors.
Okay. Thank you, Barnes, for asking the question. I'm sure you have more questions, so maybe we can allot some time for that later. No, but for now, I'll first thank you, Sir James, for answering. So ayun, actually yung issue din ito ng Nurses United.
Yes.
Na rin siya sa feed ko sa Twitter, sa Facebook. May mga ganong sentiments talaga na bakit yung Nurses United hindi na ano naman sila. So it's good na Sir James gave some semblance of clarity to that issue, no? At moving on, no, aside from Barnes, no, maybe other members, other participants in our Zoom room would like to ask a few questions, no? While we have Sir James in the room also now. Sige.
So, pwede nyo na pong i-unmute ang inyong mga sarili if you have questions. Alright?
Ako na lang ulit.
Okay.
Okay, so it seems that
Very quick one. So, accreditation is with the Office of
Rachel?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I think all the media know Rachel, so yeah. Just to clarify, yeah. There.
Meron pa po bang additional questions, clarifications concerning also the guidelines na na-discuss? Ayun, so Altermidya will be requesting also for a copy of Sir James's presentation earlier.
Yes, kasi tanong din si Barnes, no, kung pwedeng makakuha ng kopya for reference na rin siguro, no, para hindi makaligtaan ang iba't ibang requirements na inilagay doon, ang iba't ibang provisions, ganun, at etc.
Yes.
So ayun, so
Actually, may pumasok na ng new question from Dwight De Leon of Rappler. So, I guess this is addressed still to Sir James. Can we ask about a different topic? Status of Marcos cases. So, Dwight, go on and unmute yourself.
Marcos cases, which one?
Dwight?
yes, we would like to invite Dwight to unmute and turn on their camera. So maybe they could elaborate with the question.
Okay, not allowed. Dapat host daw.
Ay, okay.
Okay, consult
So,
muna natin sa ating technical team.
Tama. May we allow?
Yes. Ganito na lang kasi makakapagtanong ba si Dwight?
Dwight?
We will ask.
I just have to tell you, we have regular briefings in the COMELEC, right? So this might not be the proper time for a briefing like that.
Okay.
So if Dwight would be kind enough to hold until the regular briefing from COMELEC for me, that'd be great. Otherwise, if you want to ask the question here, go ahead. Wala akong masasagot siguro.
Okay.
So what do you think, Dwight? Would you like to Copy, sir. Sagot na lang po sa Viber, sabi ni Dwight. Okay, so, actually, I have, sorry, go, sir. Would you like to say something? Okay, so I would like to, kasi na-touch din ni Sir James kanina, yung roles ng media, for the upcoming election specifically, tapos, may part doon na media as educators din, public educators, So actually I would like to ask Barnes and Marsh, with the kasi me personally as a user of social media native vocal, social media local, maraming debates tsaka sentiments on the parang base sa mga nakikita ko parang instances of revision, of historical revisions, revisionism, na for the purpose of, for lack of a better word, pagpapabango for the incoming election. So, Barnes and March, how would you, both of you, with your experience incoming elections, parang break down these instances na parang binabago ng certain candidates o politicians yung mga naging track record nila as influential political figures, ganun.
Marsh, you wanna go first or?
Sige, I'll just cite an experience. I remember a few years ago, buhay pa si Nonoy, there's this one university in Bacolod, they put in their as a lobby ba na about Marcos, parang some sort of, again, parang different view of Marcos. So we got, when we learn about it, I think that's in 2018, when we learn about it, we called out the school, even NUJP Bacolod issued a statement. Of course, it was actually Nonoy who, because there's that one student who questioned it and he got bullied by some. So we called them out, and of course, for a school to do it, it's not right. So when we called them out, fortunately, the school was kind enough to admit the wrong doing, and then they immediately took down the video, and then we learn na parang the school is pro admin, so it was an experience, because as a media, of course, we don't want, as what Mr. Jimenez has mentioned earlier, media as educator. I think it's also right to call sources out if we think na there's what we call historical revisionism. So I think that's the recent experience I could think of. Thank you.
I think we've already been doing this. We've been calling out lies and propaganda on social media. So news organizations have been pretty good at this, and our best weapon, of course, is not just to call out, because you can call out lies, of course, and say, oh, these are not true, right? That these are lies, but you can't stop there. Our best weapon is to present the facts against these lies. So when you're able to present the facts, and you just don't just say, no, these are the facts. Of course, you support these facts with old stories, old articles, official documents, court documents. I think we've been pretty good at this. It's just that we're competing with the reach of these propagandists. So I think we have to probably go a step further, and where we lack here, and where they're ahead, is with the use of the different platforms on social media, the different apps. So, for example, they have been ahead in using TikTok. For years, hindi natin napapansin yung TikTok, and then they have been using TikTok. And then ang dami-dami na palang tao sa TikTok and they have been seeing all these propaganda videos on TikTok. Now we have to get on TikTok. We really have to get on TikTok, but we're still just catching up. I would admit, I'm gonna say that reporters have to get on TikTok, pero I will admit na I am not comfortable with TikTok, so I have to still convince myself actually. But in principle, this is what we have to do. We have to catch up with what they've been doing for years already now. And not just simply present the facts, for example, on our websites, for example, on Facebook, because now the audience is so diverse. We're not just talking about Facebook, we're talking about YouTube and TikTok, and then mamaya meron na naman lalabas na bagong app. Hindi na tayo pwede mahuli. We should adjust to how social media trends. I think that's one thing na kumbaga hindi nagawa ng media, ng news industry in general in the last few years.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, Barnes and Marsh, sa insights, and true enough, no, especially at a time na yung disinformation machinery ay pwede talagang pondohan ng mga malalaking political figures. Mas dapat ding proactive and even assertive yung ating mga media practitioners sa pag-maximize at pag-exhaust ng platforms, not just to call out the lies but also to present the truth.
Yes, combat the lies,
Yes.
no, and cover all the bases. Ika nga.
Yes.
So yan. So thank you very much, Barnes and Marsh, no. So
Alright, so meron po tayong additional question addressed again to Sir James. So if Sir James is, okay, Sir James is still here with us. So aside from health protocols, what are the other measures that the COMELEC will employ to prevent election-related violence versus media?
Well, health protocols, I don't think will prevent violence against media, just to point it out. No? But we are coordinating with the police and the military for them to be able to more quickly respond to these things and to actually more quickly tag these violent incidents as election-related violent incidents. Other than that, really, it's about. It's hard. This is a tough subject for us, no? Because COMELEC really does not have an enforcement arm. So hindi tayo nakakasali sa ganitong klaseng mga activities. Although we are very forward with our PNP partners about how critical protecting the media is to us. Pasensya na po Again, COMELEC is not really designed to have any sort of enforcement functions.
Sa ating mga Zoom participants, kung may mga questions po kay Sir James, especially related doon sa election guidelines for covering, you may unmute yourselves po and ask the question yourselves, or you can type your comments in the Zoom chat.
And of course, no, sa mga kasamahan natin sa media, no, nandito po ang ABS-CBN, no, maybe from Rappler, may iba pang questions. And of course, kasama din natin ng UNTV, CNN Philippines, Internews, Daily Tribune, at of course TV5. So baka po may gusto pa kayong i-clarify while we have Sir James at the moment, no? Kasi tayo naman yung pagkakataon, no, napaka-pivotal na moment.
Guys, since wala pa naman, can I just make an announcement?
All right,
Sir, go ahead,
sure, sir.
Yeah, okay. We've started, okay. You guys can vote absentee. I hope you know that. We have local absentee voting, which means that members of the media can actually vote ahead of everyone else, right? Kasabay kayo ng government employees at government officials who are performing election duties. So we do have local absentee media voting. And you can do that. You have to file your application forms not later than March 7, 2022, March 7 next year. And voting is the last week of April. Okay, so please coordinate with your offices because we will be sending application forms through your offices. No, this must be accomplished by the head of your media entity. Tong form na to, this will be submitted to us. You accomplish the form as an individual, then you give it to the head of your office, and then they will forward it to us so you can vote. So don't forget, sayang naman yung inyong right to vote. If you're a registered voter, you can avail of local absentee voting.
Alright, thank you very much, Sir James. So, noted po, no, yung mga deadlines at announcements from the COMELEC. So, while waiting for questions addressed to Sir James, balik po tayo ulit sa ating speakers, Barnes and Marsh. So, we have a few more questions here.
Mula kanina, di ba?
Yes, mula kanina. So, this is addressed to both Barnes and Marsh. So, how should we treat surveys? So, would like to go.
How should we treat... I'm sorry, naputol.
The question is, how should we treat surveys po?
Okay. Well, I'm not an expert on surveys, but I know that surveys are just snapshot of a certain moment. So, and I think James here would agree na it shouldn't serve as a guide to all of us during voting day. For us in the media, we report it as a snapshot nga, as I said, of a given moment. So whoever is leading on a certain week might not be leading closer to the election. And we've seen this time and again, that's been the case. In the last few elections, the front runners in the first or before the official campaign period were not the front runners closer to the election. So it's just a snapshot, and it shows us, the movement in these different races in the elections. But the election day is different. Only the votes will count.
Marchel.
I agree with Barnes actually. That's why I think some of the media houses have let go of these type of surveys, the heart, the like, and of course, last election again, we've seen the president of lagging behind the surveys. But then again, he won. So I agree na this is not this is only a snapshot. But then again, it's not really the real picture.
And thank you very much.
Yun lang, we have to provide that context when we're reporting on these surveys, because people tend to use these surveys as guides, and some people would consider, voting for a person when they see, oh, this other person doesn't have a standard chance of winning. So let's vote for this person because this person is number 1 or number 2 in the survey. So, so as media practitioners, we should provide that context all the time when we're reporting on these surveys.
May certain, from what Barnes said, may certain bandwagon effect na nangyayari na kung sino yung may pinaka malaking numbers sa polls or sa surveys ay siya yung nakakahugot somewhat ng parang sentiments ng mga tao. So, thank you very much for your answers, Barnes and March. Next question, habang wala pang nagsisend in ng questions for Sir James, what are the issues related to elections that the media should give focus on in this period? No? So, saan dapat nakatutok ang lente ng media in relation to the different election issues, no?
Ano kaya yung in this period? What period kaya? Ngayon, like right now?
sa ngayong point ng election season, no? Kung saan, kasi papalapit na rin tayo sa campaign period, no? So, ngayong point na rin, and siguro doon na rin, no, sa pagdating na rin ng pangangampanya ng mga kandidato and on the actual day of voting itself, what should the media be focusing on? What particular issues?
Wow, Marchel, you wanna go first? Ang dami niyan eh.
I think right now, especially with the pandemic, I think educating those in the far-fetched area, far-flung areas, considering that it was mentioned earlier by Barnes that the with ABS-CBN gun and with the media, the challenges in the media, with the objectivity and all, it's really hard. So for me, I think it's how to educate those with no access really to information. Probably they would have access on the radio, but it's just it would be one-sided. So that's the challenge. Not everyone can afford the internet. Not everyone can. For us as online news outlet, I think I don't think we can reach everyone. So that's the challenge for them. And the only people that are going there are candidates. So again, the information they could get will not be enough. And they will be limited as to who they will be voting for. So I don't know how we can do that, but in a recent election forum, I remember there was a suggestion that, of course, for media to collaborate and collaborate with the academe, the church, because these are the sectors that could really reach the people that are unreachable. So, I think that's the challenge.
Sa akin naman, sa akin naman kanina napag-usapan na natin historical revisionism. So this is of course under the bigger umbrella of misinformation and disinformation. There's a lot of those, of course. This has been happening hindi lang naman in the age of social media, even before the age of social media. Of course, because propaganda has existed for so long already. And we understand, of course, when electoral candidates are campaigning, there's a certain element of propaganda, of course. Again, as mentioned earlier, we have to counter these propaganda, and if some of them are outright lies, of course, we have to counter them with the truth and support these truths with the evidence, of course. So that's one. And then the other one, I think, is we shouldn't focus so much on personalities because we have this tendency in Philippine media to focus on personalities and follow each and every turn of drama. Ang election sa Pilipinas parang teleserye. May family drama, may violence, may mga switching of loyalties, may mga away. Huwag tayo masyado sana mag-focus doon. I think we should unpack the platforms of the candidates more. That's part of our duty to educate the voting public, I think. Of course, it's very interesting to see yung someone will file for candidacy and then withdraw, and then someone will substitute. Yung mga drama na gano'n, ang sarap panoorin, ang sarap sundan. Pero hindi naman natin kailangan sundan each and every turn of those events. Siguro sa amin sa foreign media, medyo guilty kami dun, because our editors would probably only assign us stories of the most interesting candidates for them, because of course hindi naman namin kino-cover again, every detail of the election here. So for example, for this election, Marcos, of course, is the one that they're watching. because of how they covered the father, of course, back in the 1970s and 80s, and the People Power Revolution in 1986. And now you have the son coming back very strongly. So, I mean, this is a very interesting story, of course, for foreigners. And it's a story worth doing, for sure. But we shouldn't stop at that. We should be able to go beyond the personalities and convey to our audiences their platforms, because that's really what matters.
First is really from Marsh, no, na mahalaga yung papel ng ating mga sectors, church people, mga basic sectors natin, and even our friends from the academe to set the facts straight, no, at mas mag-propagate ng tamang education, even voters education sa mga communities natin. And at the same time, from what Barnes said also, no, na malaki yung gampanin din ng media to battle misinformation and, you know, propaganda, especially at a time na nasa election tayo na lahat ay may kanya-kanyang narrative, lahat ay may kanya-kanyang scapegoat para iwasan yung paglahad ng mga mahalagang usapin katulad ng plataforma, tindig sa mga mahalagang issues.
Yes, and I think I also liked what Porn said about not focusing on personality so much, because it really takes away from the larger issue of what actually these candidates have to offer if ever they win an election. No, what will be the repercussions? No? So it's also a big challenge. No? It's a challenge to the media, of course, the mainstream and alternative media practitioners, to do better in their reportage of the elections. No? So as much as it is entertaining to focus on the drama, no, there's a bigger issue.
Can I just add? So I think we also have to probe deeper what the candidates are saying. So let's take, for example, 2016. You know, then candidate, now President Duterte, kept saying in 3 to 6 months he will eliminate the drug problem, crime, corruption, and I would say that even media took his word for it. We did not probe that very well. We did not ask enough how he's going to be able to do that in 3 to 6 months. And so by not asking enough how he's going to be able to do that, we contributed to how people strongly believed in what he said, that he will be able to do all those things in 3 to 6 months. Or wala na tayo sa 3, 6 months na lang. Diba? We took his jet ski joke as a joke. We did not probe that enough. He's really going to be able to do that when he gets there. What's he going to do? What does that mean, right? You know, riding the jet ski going to the West Philippine Sea. Diba? So I think this time around we have to listen to the candidates more intently and probe better what they're saying in public forums.
We will now be... Wala raw audio.
Sorry, wait lang. Let me just type it here.
Nag-chat. Meron. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear us, please? Thumbs up kung narinig niyo po kami.
Hello?
Hello?
Alright,
yan.
thumbs up.
Sige tayo. So, ayun muna. Like ulit, Barnes, thank you. And Marchel, thank you for answering the question. Barnes, thank you for the additional, to contextualize na kung gaano ka-importante i-scrutinize at busisiin ang mga sinasabi ng mga politiko na hindi lang tayo nagpapadala sa mga pangako because, well, look at the state of the country now, where we are, no? We all know where that got us. No? So, it's a challenge again for us to do better.
Alright, so we are now down to our last question. So again, as much as we would want to entertain lahat ng gustong magtanong at mag-clarify, kailangan na po nating i-limit yung ating mga questions. Maybe other questions could be up for another discussion or another venue. But now, for our last question, this is from Kath Cortez of Davao Today. So, alternative media in the regions ay laging nahuhuli sa priority list para mabigyan ng access to cover candidates and even given access during the election. For COMELEC, if Sir James is still here with us, for COMELEC, ano po ang pinaka-best to do about or accreditation if hindi po nire-recognize ng local COMELEC? And for Barnes and Marsh, what can alternative media do kapag limited ang access given to us? Alright. Maybe Sir James can answer first.
Yeah, for accreditation, kung kunyari, hindi ino-honor yung accreditation ninyo, what we're gonna do is what we do kasi is we send out these template cards, these media cards. We will make sure that we have contact information there that you can call in case hindi kayo ma-honor. No, sorry. In case your IDs are dishonored, please do not hesitate to call my office and we will sort it out for you. I totally acknowledge this problem kasi nare-report na rin sa amin ito that there are some places locally na naghahanap pa sila ng ID from a local authority. This should not be the case. Dapat kung dapat kung nag-accredit na yung COMELEC, accredited na yan because it's our gig, right? So wala nang ibang local authority na dapat nagbibigay ng ID. So, again, in those ID cards that we're going to distribute, we'll make sure that you have contact information so that you can refer the matter to us if you are denied access, and we will help you sort it out. But other than that, you really have to make an effort to get accredited.
Alternative media do kapag limited ang access given to us?
Ako ba? Okay.
Kanino yun?
Okay. All right. What's the question again? What alternative media can do kapag limited na access? First of all, hindi dapat limited na access. Yan. Hindi talaga dapat because access to media should be access to all kinds of media. Wala dapat segregation between alternative. Actually, hindi ko masyado gusto yung term na alternative media kasi media lang naman tayo lahat. We're all reporting on the same things. So, yon. But if that happens, there are other ways now. Like I said, we are reporting during a pandemic. May limited access. I think everyone, one way or another, will probably have limited access. We can't go to every place where candidates go to campaign. That's already happening right now, and so we use social media. We use handouts. We normally would not prefer to use handouts. We normally would prefer to use our own material. But because we are in the middle of a pandemic, it's acceptable sometimes. And if so-called alternative media is given more limited access than, again, so-called mainstream media, then yes, that's one way to go about it. But again, hindi dapat. Hindi dapat. We should all have the same access.
Alright, thank you. Marsh, would you want to add?
I think it would be an interesting case study, the election coverage in the coming 22 election. Kasi of course, it was emphasized earlier by Mr. Jimenez na those who can enter, of course, in in the voting centers, the number of people will be limited, di ba? In the voting area. So I think it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be a challenge for both COMELEC and the journalists covering there. And of course, our safety should always be a priority, di ba? As much as we want to be there, or every step of the way, we still have to ensure that we are covering safely. So it's not unlike before na if there we tend to overcrowd, diba, when there's a prominent candidate, or if there are officials are voting in, we tend to crowd. So it's just to get the shot of those officials or candidates. So it's interesting to know how we will do it in this election. I don't. Again, it would be a challenge for everyone. It's new to us, but I hope we still prioritize our safety. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Barnes at Marsh. Yun nga, no, hopefully naman, no, Sir James din, no, since dito ka pa, siguro ma-assure din natin na as long as dumaan sa tamang proseso ng accreditation, no, lahat ng iba't ibang media na nalista nga, no, na nailahad sa presentation ni Sir James kanina ay walang malilimit na access, no, sa pagka-cover ng election, di ba? So, ayan, thank you very much, no, for sharing your time with us, Sir James, Barnes, March, at Mensch.
Yes, so mahalaga no yung mga naging discussions natin for today. So again, para sa ating mga media practitioners na kasama natin sa Zoom, Altermidya will be requesting access po doon sa naging 2022 election guidelines for media from Sir James, and also sa mga naka-miss out ng ating naging discussion for today, you can always go back to our Facebook live stream on the Altermidya page and Bulatlat media page.
And syempre maraming salamat din po sa lahat ng nakilahok sa ating webinar ngayon, sa mga kasama natin sa media, sa mga nanonood sa Facebook Live. Talagang nga namang napaka, how would you describe the discussion this day? Kasi ako, relevant, timely po. So ikaw, ano mo yung describe?
Actually, yung buong webinar series na inorganize po ng ating Altermidya at Bulatlat at mga partner media at mga partner organizations ay napakahalaga po, lalo na sa panahon ng eleksyon na papasukin natin, na katulad na binabanggit natin past speakers, ay first time na magko-cover tayo ng election sa ganitong time and age ng pandemic, at syempre pinatinding disinformation machinery. At ngayon parang kapag i-compare mo relative, no, sa mga nakaraang taon, mga nagdaang taon ng elections, declaring pa lang, nasa phase pa lang tayo na nagde-declare ng candidacy, ang dami ng patong-patong at mga magugulo na mga usapin na kailangang tugunan ng ating mga media practitioners. At dito actually ang relevance naman, ang value nito ay pupwesto talaga yung ating mga media practitioners sa pagbabahagi at pagre-report ng katotohanan at pagtindig para sa katotohanan.
And since we have hopefully learned, no, a lot from the past years since the 2016 elections, we as media practitioners can try to do better, and the general public also, no, who deserve better access to information, no, from us. Can also be well informed and educated as the 2022 national election nears, no. So ayun po, maraming salamat sa mga tumutok muli, at hindi pa dito nagtatapos ang Altermidya Voters Education Project, of course, at antabayanan niyo lamang po ang iba't ibang alternative media outfits sa iba't ibang social media platforms na maglulunsad pa po ng future endeavors na ibang events as the 2022 election is near. So from us at Altermidya, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, at YouTube at Altermidya. No? At sa Instagram, we are at Altermidya Network. No? And what about Bulatlat?
Yes, and of course, yung Bulatlat ay matatagpuan nyo rin po sa Facebook, Twitter, at meron kaming podcast sa Spotify. At syempre, nasa Kumu rin kami bilang we have to exhaust all means.
Tama yan. Nasabi ko nga naman, mag-TikTok na rin tayo. No? Wala pa tayo TikTok doon. Marami ng TikTok. But anyway, ayun. So,
maraming salamat muli. Kami ang inyong mga nakasama. Ako si Mench Tilendo.
at ako naman si Neil Eco.
Maalam na pagbati!